In the last episode, we looked at Pindar and his influence on Abraham Cooley, a poet whose mixed meter and elaborate and unique stanza design called the Irregular Ode becomes the blueprint for expressing a flood of ideas. Look at, for example, Dryden's poem Alexander's Feast, about a musician's song that moves from Alexander's conception to drinking to Alexander's mind. Timaeus, placed on high amid the tuneful choir, with flying fingers touch the lyre, the trembling notes ascend the sky and heavenly joys inspire. The song began from Jove. The master saw the madness rise, his glowing cheeks, his ardent eyes. He's seeing Alexander change. It's all about love too. And while he heaven and earth defied, changed his hand and checked his pride, he chose a mournful muse, soft pity to infuse. He sung Darius great and good, by too severe a fate, fallen, 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 fallen from his high estate, and weltering in his blood. The poem shifts from one effect to another, all dictated by the musician's choice of genres, until he stirs up revenge and he burns his enemy's palace down. The ode ends on Saint Cecilia, whose powers are more angelic. It's a nice epode to the crazy fluctuation of emotions that the poem is organized around. Thus long ago, ere or before heaving bellows learned to blow, while organs yet were mute, in other words, church music, Timotheus, that's the musician, to his breathing flute and sounding lyre, these are the classical instruments, could swell the soul to rage or kindle soft desire. At last divine Cecilia came, it's the patron saint of musicians, inventress of the vocal frame. She invented the organ, the sweet enthusiast. From her sacred store enlarged the former narrow bounds and added length to solemn sound. There's lots of surprises in all this irregularity. It's so different from the boxy symmetry of the sonnet, and yet both offer surprises formally and intellectually. Now, we have to remember, besides Pindar, we also have Horace as a second model. Now, Horace is the one who described Pindar as the raging river, right? Now, he also is famous in his ode to bees. Horace is describing himself as a different kind of poet. He's not Pindar, and he can't be a poet like Pindar. I create my verses in the manner of a humble bee in Mantinus, working hard to gather pollen from all the pleasant time, all about the many groves on the banks of flowing Tiber, a painstakingly minor poet shaping my lyrics. You, a poet of much greater power, this is who he's addressing his poem to, will sing of Caesar. So his poetry is not the river, his poetry is on the banks of the river. You notice in that passage the honey discourse, right? That's the sweet rhetoric, and the honey is produced by flowers, again, the flowers of rhetoric. Now, Horace's example allows for other tones and approaches, like Thomas Gray's elegy written in a county churchyard, where the poet enters front and center in the poem. The workday is done. The curfew tolls the knell of parting day. The lowing herd winds slowly o'er the lea. The ploughman homeward plods his weary way and leaves the world to darkness and to me. It's an A-B stanza. Everything is about his perceptions and his thoughts. This is the beginning of modern poetry before it returns backwards to allegorical figures like ambition, grandeur, memory. Can honor's voice provoke the silent dust, or flattery soothe the dull cold ear of death? Suddenly, Thomas Gray's poem is everyman again. You see these same allegories appear in Collins's Ode on the Poetical Character, or Anne Finch's Spleen, with her description of depression and its fitting form, the ode. What art thou, spleen, which everything dost ape? Thou Proteus to abused mankind, who never yet thy real cause could find, or fix thee to remain in one continued shape. Spleen is always changing, still varying thy perplexing form. Now a dead sea thou'lt represent, a calm of stupid discontent, then dashing on the rocks wilt rage into a storm. Trembling sometimes thou dost appear, dissolved into a panic fear. Now these poems are from 1751, 1746, and 1701 respectively. Let's jump to 1798, into Romanticism, and let's look at Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey. Here, the line lengths are regular, iambic pentameter, but there's no rhyme scheme. And you guys all remember what that is. That's blank verse, and that's one of Surrey's other great innovations. The only irregular feature associated with Cooley and Pindar is the different line lengths for each stanza. So each stanza is of a different length. There are lots of enjambments in this poem, where lines continue on into the next one, giving it almost a prose-like quality.
5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters, and again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur.
And what about its structure? Can you discern the ode's famous strophe, antistrophe, epode, triadic structure? I think so. First, the strophe. It begins with the poet's return to a spot along the Wye River in England. He hasn't seen it in 5 years, and he's just looking at it. And then there's a turn, or the counter turn. That's the antistrophe. We're told these beauteous forms passed into his purer mind, producing tranquil restoration. He hasn't seen the scene in a long time. Remember, it's been 5 years. The antistrophe is about the effect of this place on him since living in the city. Time is a feature here. How, nevertheless, all of this that he's been thinking about and reflecting upon still resides within him. How that unintelligible world becomes lighted once he sees it again. The stanza ends with an important idea.
We see into the life of things.
That will be the question. How can we see into the independent existence of things, the previously unintelligible? This is the epode, the standing, the if-this moment.
If this be but a vain belief, yet oh, how oft.
But it's temporary, conditional. That's what the if clause says, right? His spirits return to the river. And then there's a new turn, or strophe.
And now, with gleams of half-extinguished thought.
He's half asleep. He's half thinking. The mind revives thoughts as he stands over the river. We're back to the present. New thoughts feed on this looking upon the river.
That in this moment there is life and food for future years.
Then we get this beautiful image of him as a child. What was he like? He was an animal, a roe or deer.
So I dare to hope, though changed, no doubt, from what I was when first I came among these hills, when like a roe I bounded o'er the mountains, by the sides of the deep rivers and the lonely streams, wherever nature led.
He played in the woods without thought, with glad animal movements. Now he's struggling to describe this movement, right? The stanza's long, with strophe and antistrophe mixed together. There's no clear break. The antistrophe is introduced briefly. He has to resort to abstractions, how he ran where nature led.
I cannot paint what then I was.
You understand the problem. How do you describe your dog or cat's perception of the world? how do they interact in it? Their awareness. Think of your nephews or any kids you have. Like my son Max, he would run around, he would jump, skip, fall. He would fall on the ground, he would make grunting sounds, he would make gun sounds. What was he aware of? What did he see? Did he see anything? Like when he would jump onto a lamppost, did he see a lamppost? Or was it merely an object to spring off from and then fall onto the ground, which did he even recognize that was called a sidewalk, right? What did he see before he turned 7? This is what Wordsworth is trying to describe but can't.
Their colors and their forms were then to me an appetite.
That was my son, stumbling, jumping, a place to grip your hand, the sound of rocket ships, now a soldier rolling on the ground.
That had no need of a remoter charm by thought supplied, nor any interest borrowed from the eye.
He's not thinking. It's just dizzying raptures and a feeling and of love. But now the older poet can't access that. That time is past, he says. There is a loss. The end of the strophe and antistrophe begins. The antistrophe of mature thoughts versus the strophe of animal joy. This disturbance is a good thing. It shakes the foundations of complacency, and it's a profound experience. He's no longer a child, but a moral being. The separation of experience from reflection is crucial. Do you see how philosophical this is? You couldn't do this in a sonnet or a ballade or a rondeau. When we move into the second epode, or stand, we return again to the present. Only this time we find his sister standing next to him. What does she supply him? A bridge to that childish experience.
My dear, dear friend, and in thy voice I catch the language of my former heart, and read my former pleasures in the shooting lights of thy wild eyes. Oh, yet a little while may I behold in thee what I was once.
Okay, I know it's bad that his sister is the possibility for him to access that previous world. But that's his idea. He can hear in her words himself as a child, living in the world thoughtlessly. I mean, she's not a philosopher like he is. But she's also not a child, remember. She's not a roe. Why? Because she has the ability to speak. She can inform him of what is in both of them, and then he can write. So in other words, he can access himself through her and then put that into words. And isn't that the Pindar moment, this writing?
Alright guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification bell.
Oh no, maybe we should say something. You can do the Ripper thing. You want?
I wanted to zoom though in on that. How do you zoom?
With your hand.
I know I'm trying to. It's not doing it. Oh wait, there. Oh, there it is. I was going the wrong way. All right, say something.
Let's end it. Let's do that. What's the finale statement?
I hope you enjoyed
this season.
Yeah. I hope you enjoyed
of the lit plague. Okay.
This plague season of literature.
Okay, good.
Go ahead, Action.
So, I guess that's it. I hope you enjoyed this plague-filled season of literature, and hopefully we meet again, but not under these plague-like experiences.